All these mercies we ask in your holy and precious name, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, any apologies for absence? I received notification from 2 members that they are on their way. Okay. Well, I want to welcome everyone to this meeting. We have Auditor General and her team. We have persons from the Ministry of Finance, I believe. We have the Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, and Prof. from CMU, Professor Ajaguna, and other members of the team at CMU. And of course, we have some of our members here, sufficient to constitute a quorum. We will be continuing today with the review of the Auditor General's Performance Audit Report. It's a special audit report, it's entitled, of the Caribbean Maritime University, which we commenced last week. But before we get into the substantive matters of that, we must address the minutes which were prepared and circulated last night. So I will go straight to that and proceed on a page-by-page basis. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4.
Chairman.
Yes.
The second paragraph.
On page 4?
On page 4. The middle of it, she gave the example where a risk was highlighted while conducting the CMU audit, which had not previously identified by her team as auditors. It should be a team of auditors or as auditors?
I suppose it could be her team of auditors.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Page 5. Page 6.
Chairman, the third paragraph, I think it is. Is it Dr. Marsha Hall?
Marshall.
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 Thought so. But
see that? Marshall Hall. Yeah. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. Page 11. Page 12. On page 12 in the second paragraph, about line 9, line 7, it's bills of lading, not laden, L-A-D-I-N-G. And that's actually repeated on page 15, but we will take it when we get there. Page 13. Page 14.
might I recommit page 13, Chairman?
Yes.
the middle of technically the second paragraph. It says permanent without secretary. She said that this was provide information sent to the then permanent. This is like about 7, 8 lines long.
Page 15. I believe the same error, bill of lading, is repeated on this page, in the middle paragraph. Twice on that, in the same line. It appears twice in that line. Page 16. Matters arising. Well, before we move to matter arising, could we have a motion for the confirmation of the minutes? Moved by Dr. Guy. Seconded, anyone? Seconded by Mr. Campbell. Thank you. Matters arising. Madam Clerk, any issues that you want to bring to our attention in terms of matters arising? Yes, so we can make mention of that. There were 2 issues that are highlighted in the minutes as requiring some action on the part of the ministry or CMU. One was to do with the specifications of the building as reflected in the contract documents between CMU and so-called logistics company 1. We were sent by email a page with a listing of quantities of various items or inputs and a supporting steel frame. Members have that. Yeah. Are there any questions on that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, member.
Through your line, to direct a question to Ms. Eden. What I'd like to know if the quantity we have, or the quantity we have here, were these quantities established before a request was made for quotation?
The quantity, good morning. The quantities were established before. That is what was sent off for the quotation.
You sent out for pricing,
yes,
for the quote. Well, if that is the case, let's go back to item 3.26. This one, yeah. And it's on page 20. Because the question I'd hope to ask today, how were you paying for items like I-beam and steel for the building after you received the quotation? Because it must have been established before what is required to construct this building. So the question I wanted to ask, how come you arrive at this after you get the quotation that you paid, it's said you paid here, thereafter on June 6, 2018, CMU paid $368,303 to Logistics Company 1 for the I-beam steel and other assembly materials. Of note, CMU had not previously included I-beam, steel, iron, and other assembly parts, essential components required to enable the construction of the building. So the question I plan on asking, how could you ask for quotation to construct a building when all these critical items were not included? And these items, you can't put up the sandwich panel and those without you have the beams and the columns. Those are the I-beams. So I was a little curious then. So if in fact you had all of these items specified before, how do we arrive at the point of paying for them after? So they would have been included in the 621, the million that was paid before? 1,000 US. It would have had to be included if this was sent to them before. It would have to be included in the 621 or 631,000 US dollars. Therefore, how could we pay them for this at a later stage? I need some explanation here because this is totally confusing. And it's this, I don't think we can just take it as this. So I need some serious explanation as to how we arrive at this.
Yeah. So thank you, Member Warmington. That is indeed curious and begs for a response as to why the tender documents produced a contract valued at $621,132 US dollars, which was only for part of the materials needed to construct this building, and a couple of months afterwards, an additional US $368,303 is paid to Logistics Company 1 for certain essential components of the building. And we are told that there was this listing of the required material inputs for the building. So why was it done in that odd way?
The building was spec'd, and the request for the quotation was sent off. Subsequently, the structural engineer looked at the materials. So the initial quotation and the initial costing and the payment and everything included steel beams. The structural engineer revised the sizing of the steel beams later on, and that too was because we had gotten to the point where the decision was being taken to also, as I had stated last week, to build out the engineering workshop. The engineering workshop was a 3-story building, and the location of the engineering workshop was considered, a water table was considered to be higher. So the engineer revised the size of the steel beam. So we in fact got 2 sets of steel beams. So it wasn't a situation where it was overlooked in the first instance. It was a revision of the size of the steel beams, and so we purchased an additional set of steel beams.
I'm not satisfied with that answer, not at all. It says here, CMU had not previously included I-beam, steel, iron, and other assembly parts, essential components required to enable the construction of the building. What you're saying that they resized these stuff, but this is not what is said in the report that we have here. So the report and what you're saying is conflicting. So they need to reconcile the answers.
We sent, if I may, Chair, this was the information that was sent out. It was also the information that was sent to the permanent secretary. It is what the quotations were received on for all. This
paragraph in our report, unless it was supplied by someone. Okay? She's saying they sent the thing to the PS. I don't believe that the Auditor General could pluck this out of thin here and place it inside the here. She could not have done that. So that information must have come from somewhere. So I'd like a proper explanation to this that said that CMU had not previously included I-beam, steel, iron, and other assembly parts, essential component required to construct the building. But you are now saying that there is resizing of the beams and such. So I need an explanation here as to how this particular sentence got into the report. If you send the correct stuff or the correct information was supplied. That's what I'd like to know.
Sir, I am unable to speak to the interpretation of the Auditor General's report. I can only speak to the information that was sent. The procurement documents and everything that is on file and still remains on file at CMU included this information. And so I cannot speak to, there was no discussion with myself before the report came out in terms of what was provided in the specifications. I can only speak to what I am certain was sent and has remained on file.
You were interviewed by the AG staff?
Not about this specifically. I had a conversation with the AG staff at their offices, and they asked about a number of matters. Excuse me?
I think, Mr. Chairman, the AG needs to assist us here. Definitely with this thing.
And if I may just finish that statement, so after my meeting at the offices of the AG, the files were requested, but there was no meeting on the specifics for the sandwich panel building subsequently. There was no discussion. The files were requested and they were sent off. Questions were asked and they were sent off. When the draft report came out, there was a timeline in it, and in the response, CMU sent back the timelines in terms of the activities, but there was no face-to-face discussion with the Auditor General's team, with myself at the very least, on this matter.
So are you saying that the statement in the report that CMU had not previously included high beam steel, iron, and other assembly parts, essential components to enable the construction of the building, you're saying that's not correct?
No, it is not. Because the documents that were, they went, the boxes of files, we sent several boxes of files, were sent to the Auditor General's team. In fact, my team took them across. And there was, the information was on record. There was no interview about the specific matter. So I cannot speak to what the interpretation is.
Chairman, I need for us to get the answer, because last meeting, Ms. Hayden herself indicated that they were never part of the initial amount. So I find it a little curious now that we are being told this. But the AG is waiting to comment, Chairman.
Ms. Hayden did not speak on it, if I may, Chair. When it was raised, I made no comment on it. I responded to the specific questions, and the matter was asked for, the specification, and I pulled it from the record and sent it off. And we have the records which can be re-examined. They form part of the records in the project office. They also form part of the records that were sent to the Ministry of Education. They form part of the records that were sent to the Procurement Committee and subsequently on to Treasury. So there are different sets of the same record that can verify my statement, sir.
AG, you wanted to say something?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. No, Mr. Chairman, I think we're going to need a session of truth and reconciliation.
Yes.
The most I can say is that this audit commenced last year, January. The audit report was completed somewhat, I think, mid-November. It wasn't completed in a rush. Now, I had no discussion with Ms. Hayden, but I was in the room when communications were being sent by email to Ms. Hayden. I'm aware of the discussions with Ms. Hayden because such discussions would have been reported to me. I don't know that this is the forum for us to have a debate about what was said and what was not said. Before I provide the information that I have before, I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, there, I believe, 2 iterations to this report. So Ms. Hayden had ample opportunity to provide a response and to dispute anything that was in that report. Much of what Ms. Hayden is sharing with the committee, I am hearing for the first time last week. I am not in a position at this point to provide all the information. I have 3 binders. It's really not going to be productive for me to be flipping through hastily to try and find the information. So I am suggesting that the ministry, in fact, provided a response agreeing to the report. Ms. Hayden is saying something else. I am requesting that all areas of dispute be provided to me, Mr. Chairman, to give me an opportunity to do whatever research is necessary, the extent of it, to determine if there is an error in interpretation. However, as it pertains to this matter, I know there's other information in the binder, but what was sent to Mr. Dean Roy Bernard on March 12, 2018, requesting approval, and it was signed by the then president, Mr. Fritz Pinnock, it's for an amount of $621,132. I have asked the team to locate the information that would substantiate the additional amount. What was reported to me is that CMU's explanation for the differences that they had not considered that initially. But I gather, Mr. Chairman, that as we proceed with the meeting, I'm also going to hear other areas of disagreement. I don't think it's right that I sit here having a debate with Ms. Hayden or anybody else for that matter about the veracity of the information in the report without being provided an opportunity to put together a response. It's not, I don't think it's productive use of the committee's time.
Chairman.
As we go along, if more of these arise, we can collate them and then ask for a fulsome or considered response. But this is one that we've identified where Ms. Hayden is saying now that these items were indeed part of the original 621,000 US, but subsequently, due to some engineering reconsiderations, a 50% increase was paid for some of these same items again. That is what Ms. Hayden is indicating, which is not consistent with what is in the member.
This has to be examined also, because we got this one that this was a specification. So if this is saying that they weren't included, this is saying they were included. So they would have to, the AG would have to try to reconcile these two arguments because they are opposite to each other.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know when this was produced and whether it was part of the, whether it was indeed part of the original contract that was signed in March. Dr. Guy, you wanted to say something, and then member.
Yes, Chairman. Ms. Hayden, I'm having a little difficulty here and probably could help me. You indicated just now that the water table was high and hence there was need for additional H-beams. But you also said that your team consisted of a consulting architect, structural engineer, and other persons in the team. And you are only realizing that after you made the arrangements to get this material, this is when this is coming to light. It leads me to wonder if you had a good team. By the way, Ms. Hayden, you said you are a project manager.
Yes, I did, sir.
What's your qualification?
So I have a bachelor's degree. I also
in
history and soci.
Okay.
I am a trained IT professional, and I also have certification in project management. And I have a master's pending from the university, the Caribbean Maritime University. I need to submit a paper in logistics and supply chain management.
The certification you have in
project management.
In project management. Where is this from?
From the University of New Orleans.
It's a certification?
It is a certificate in project management. I am not a professional. I'm not a PMP. I do not have that designation.
I understand that. But is it one of these courses, certification in project management, that is like a 30 to 40 week classroom attendance or something like that?
It is the 32-hour minimum, and this is from as far back as I think.
And what else is required for you to get the rest of the qualification?
Which qualification, sir?
Huh?
Which qualification?
That is all the qualification you have in project management.
I chose not to do the
No,
PMP
I'm just
designation.
asking, is that all the qualification you have in project management?
It is, but I also have several years of experience having managed projects for Digicel, Claro, and several other entities. I have been in project management since 1995.
Okay, all right. And you are heading a team now which somewhere down the road finds that there is a construction deficit in terms of material that is required for a simple construction. I mean, I can't reconcile in my own mind the extent to which there was proper oversight in getting there. Could you help?
So if I could step back, sir, in terms of the various questions. One, and I am in no way trying to rehash the discussion per se, but I'm providing clarity. The quotations received from all the providers, even the ones that we said we really should not have asked for because they were direct contracting, it clearly shows the listing for I-beams and H-beams, which is the metal for the steel frame, and it shows that. As I said before, last week in my response, we were asked to shelve the lecture theater building because we were nearing school, and we recognized that we would not have been able to finish the ground floor both because we had funding problems, and so we were asked to construct an expansion to the engineering workshop. And it is the expansion to the engineering workshop for which we use the sandwich panels, and it was recognized for that structure that we needed different beams, and that is why there was the additional request for the beams. So we actually have on campus 2 sets of I-beams. And that is based on the recommendation from the structural engineer.
AG?
I'm just trying to put together all the information, but if you look at table 9 of the report, page 33, you will see the breakdown. I'm just trying to find the information, the supporting information. The initial quote of 621, that was approved by the committee on April 11, 2018. The quote in relation to the 368, that was approved on May 15, 2018. So they were submitted differently, but the letter of request that went to the permanent secretary requesting approval for direct contracting states 621. I have a copy of that, Mr. Chairman, and I can provide it to the clerk so you can have sight of it.
You had wanted to say something? No. Ms. Hannah?
Ms. Hayden, last week I was inclined to believe a lot of your arguments. Having gone through the report, this week I'm not. And I just want to ask you one question. If you were managing the building of your own house on a mortgage, would you have managed the resources this way?
It is very easy to say, in hindsight, this is how it should have been handled. I do believe that the one thing that is, I am responding to your member, but for me it is not a straightforward yes or no answer. It would be very easy to say no, but the circumstances that prevailed would provide explanation. As I had indicated last week, and again this week, we sent through for approval to the permanent secretary? Yes, 4,621. That included I-beams and H-beams, which would have been the structure of the building. The university made a decision later on that we... Yes.
The reason why I'm stopping you is that this management of the project is not a singular item. It's a collective responsibility in terms of your responsibility as a project manager. One of the things that you said last week when you were here and when we were going through the motions of not having a committee or a unit is that you had to go to the president for sign-off, correct? Yeah, I remember it clearly. So if you're saying that the approach was not a linear approach, but more hyperlinear, going up and down all over the place, it is your responsibility to manage the variables in terms of the project. If you are the person with the project management experience, and the president is now being charged guilty in the eyes of mismanagement, you are to be blamed as well, because you were advising him. So that's why I'm asking you. It cannot be that in hindsight, and that's what the AG is saying, it can't be in hindsight that you're now providing clarity. It had to be in foresight that you had the responsibility. So because all of the evidence here points to your dereliction of duty as the manager of the project. So you can sit here and try and clarify and go through, but it's not making sense. I don't know if it's not making sense to anybody else, but it's not making sense to me.
Remember, as you said, it is hyperlinear, and I think the one factor that is not being considered is the part where the university made a decision to focus on putting up another structure, which threw other factors into being. And the other structure, which is the engineering workshop, for which the sandwich panels were used to construct. The square footage of the building that we sent through to the permanent secretary was for 46,800 square feet.
And what is the going rate for the square footage of a building like that in a container? Well, just a building like that. You can bring it from China so you know the competitive rates. What is it?
For a sandwich panel building?
Yes.
For the sandwich panel building, when we looked at, so 1 second please. When we looked at the costing we were getting from another supplier, the rates varied depending on the thickness of the panels that were being used. And so for a 100 millimeter panel, it was at the time $2.89 per square foot. For 25 millimeter, it was $1.96. For 40 millimeters, for the internal wall, it was $2.05. And for the roof, it was $2.16, and the rate we got them at was for $1.70. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to do the quick calculation in terms of that. When we looked at the going rate at the time for a block and steel building, I believe that was somewhere about $20, which was anywhere between I think $15 to $20. So the cost for putting up the building would have been significantly less.
So when you actually went through now and you got the competitive rates and you provided those to the company that I think my colleague Member Bunting spoke to last week about it being formed the month before, in your deliberations, one, you decided to go with the cheaper alternative. But in those deliberations, and when you took the decision, where is the contract with the company?
There is no contract that I am aware of. When I requested the contract, it wasn't. The matter was passed. Once it went to the procurement committee, the norm is that it goes to the office of the president for sign off, and then the contract arrangements are handled there. I have not seen the contract. I do not know if one exists. When I requested it, there was none.
Okay, Ms. Hayden, so in terms of not having a contract, how did all the other steps come in terms of the negotiations with the shipping company to get the things here? What was the president acting on? What was the university acting on to hold that company responsible if in fact you did not get the materials as stipulated that you were ordering? What documentation? Does the permanent secretary have it? Ms. McLean, Dr. McLean, do you have it? Where is it?
Member, I am not in possession of a contract as it relates to...
What's your direct source? On what grounds?
So my understanding based on the investigation is that there's an invoice that went to Treasury and the amounts were paid 2 days after the procurement committee had approved. So we have not been able to put our hands on a contract that would have guided the process with Logistics One.
So there was this bidding process that really ought not to have happened, according to Ms. And the lowest bidder was the person who procured the other bids. Though I note that the letter to the ministry that requested direct contracting to be approved indicates that 5 international suppliers were contacted to obtain quotations. Doesn't give the impression that they were contracted through one of the 5. So that was a little, maybe that wasn't understood by the permanent secretary on receiving this letter. But in any event, there was no contract signed as such. There was an invoice that was produced and it was paid in two days later for $621,000 US. The materials that were included in the $621,000, Ms. Hayden, when the decision was soon thereafter taken to basically abandon that project and expand the engineering facility instead, for which a whole new set of materials would be required, amounted to about 50% of what had already been paid, to take the $621,000 up to nearly $1 million. What happened to the materials that were included in the $621,000? Were they used or they couldn't be used on the new project?
They're rusting away.
What was in the new was beams. The sandwich panels were used in the new projects, and some of the beams were used for lateral support, but the supporting beams were the ones that largely came in the new request. So all the materials for the 621 came, all the materials for the 300 came, and they were used in the projects. The sandwich panels were used to clad the structure, and the steel frame was put up, and the additional material is on site. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Excuse me? The materials came, and we were told that we should start the engineering workshop. What we did is that we primed the metal, and so we've had them there primed. It may be necessary. Prior to us, our campus is closed, so prior to us going off, we were going to prime them again. So it is a process of making sure that, and it is a process that we've been doing with many of the material we have, because we have, even when they have been erected, we have to make sure that we maintain them.
No, I had asked my original question, Ms. Hayden, you didn't answer it, which was if you were building your own house, would you have managed it this way?
If I were building my own house, member, I would not have changed the plans midstream. And so what I started out with is what I would have ended up with. But I don't necessarily have, if I'm building my own house, then I would have had total control over the process.
So that's what I'm trying to say. Who is the we that you kept saying? Turn off your mic. You keep saying you were advised and you were advised and you were advised. Who is the we that keeps changing? Who is the we that kept advising you to change midstream?
So I report directly to the president of the university, and my instructions come from the president of the university. So I can't, of my own, get up and say I'm going to change and put up a structure X or Y. It has to go through a process. So in the case of the engineering workshop, for example, we were approaching the start of school, and it was recognized that we would not have had the lecture theater building completed in time, but we could have completed a smaller building that would have given the additional rooms that were necessary to deliver class. So my understanding is that the decision was taken, and I was advised by the president that we needed to put up the engineering workshop instead.
And you feel confident, looking at all of this data, when you've collated the data, that you're sitting in front of us, that other people have resigned, that this has become a true debacle. You feel confident that your decision taking and that your actions in the circumstances were correct, or do you feel that you have the cover because you reported to the president?
I cannot state that I have the cover because I report to the president. It is an interesting situation when you work in the way we work, because on the one hand, you either follow directives, or on the other hand, you are being insubordinate. And so which do you respond to?
But insubordination versus your reputation, because anybody watching this who has a desire to hire you in project management would have to think twice. So I'm still asking you the substantive question. Others have resigned, clearly because perhaps they realize that their actions were culpable or compromising. What is it that you feel now, looking at all of this? Now the AG is going to now come with a second issue that is going to destroy your arguments, perhaps. And I'm asking you, sitting here, how are you feeling now that you're seeing all of the information? Because I can tell you how I am feeling. I kind of feel sorry for you, because this don't look good.
Remember, the one thing I was sure of when I went to CMU is I went because I had a passion for the young people. And when all of this matter started coming out, the easiest thing would have been to hand in my resignation. It would have been the easiest thing. But I also felt it was necessary to stay on and to make sure that at least I represented my involvement in it. My contract comes to an end shortly, and I have stated several times, I'm not sure I'm going to renew it. But at the end of the day, I felt it was important to come and give an account rather than to run away from the issue or to hide and present myself as totally innocent. I do recognize that reputation-wise, I am going to take a beating. But at the end of the day, I have a responsibility to come and speak to my actions.
Do you feel the others who have resigned have run away and are trying to prove themselves innocent?
That it's asking the witness, so to speak, Ms. Hayden, anyway, to speculate about what other person's motivations are. Perhaps we shouldn't go there. But remember, Dr. Guy wanted to ask a question.
Chairman,
But
I'd like to ask Ms. Hayden, based on this listing of the specifications for the material that eventually amounted to $989,000 plus US dollars. This was what was the estimate of the materials required. Are you in a position to say that CMU received all of what was ordered? Was an inventory done on the material that came in? And you could say categorically that whatever you paid for, you received at the institution?
To the best of my knowledge, CMU received what we paid for.
So an inventory was actually done?
There was a checkoff that was done when the items were being offloaded off the container.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Just coming to, go ahead, Ms. Finn. Go ahead.
And I just wanted to follow up, were all those items also used?
Not all the items have yet been used, member, because the university took a decision that they would halt the progress on the lecture theatre building. My understanding is that we did not have sufficient funds to continue it, one, and two, because we had school starting, we looked at putting up structures that, yes. And so several outside of the engineering workshop, the 3-story building that went up, we also expanded an existing structure. The containers were, it was a containerized building before that was donated, and we expanded that building from 3 classrooms to 6, so we went up an additional story. We also built what is now our medical center from it. So the material was used in some part, and material is still on the ground to be able to complete this structure.
Ms. Hayden, this listing makes reference to the lecture theatre building. So presumably this doesn't include the additional materials that were required when the decision was taken to switch over to expanding the engineering building.
For the structure, it was what the additional materials were required for. When we were buying the building, so I'm providing clarity, because the sandwich panels, my understanding is that there are enough sandwich panels to complete the lecture theatre building, and so the question could arise as to how could you use it on other buildings and still have material left. When we conceptualized the building, when we looked at what it had, the design was that you would have the steel frame up and you would clad both walls with a sandwich panel. When they came and we put up the engineering workshop, we recognized that if you left the steel beam bare and just clad the steel beam, then you could only put up one wall, and so you would have had sufficient to use the panels for others.
Yeah, sorry,
So,
I'm just trying to understand. So you're saying this is the entire list?
That
the
is
full 900 and whatever?
No, sir.
What? No,
that
it's
was
not.
for the 600.
This is
and
just the 600.
Yes,
That's what
sir.
I said.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, all right.
Yes, sir.
AG, you wanted to say something? Yes. AG, you wanted to come in and say? Yeah.
Yes, Chairman, I just wanted to, I'm hesitating because I'm, in my mind wondering if I should actually present this or circulate it to the committee rather than having the crosstalk. But it's just in furtherance of the argument that I had put forward that the evidence before us suggested 2 separate procurement exercises. I have before me the letter. Are you hearing me? Yes. I have before me a memo dated May 15th, 2018 to the Chairman, Procurement Committee from Ms. Hayden. And the letter basically, the memo sets out basically much of what she has said. The subject is high beam for construction of Block E building. And it says, as you are aware, the student population of the Caribbean Maritime University is continuously growing. As such, we are currently constructing a building to ensure student demands are met and that daily operations are carried out in an efficient and effective manner. The building will utilize panels, insulation with internal and external galvanized steel because it possesses various advantages such as great reduction in construction time when compared to the traditional building materials. And I'm just going down to the important elements. So I've skipped a couple paragraphs. To ensure the required amount of materials, semicolon, high beams, for the durability and stability of the building at an economical cost of high quality and at a precise fit for the structure panels of the quotations received, that from BSS of value of United States dollars 212,520 is the best choice for CMU. Based on the above mentioned, we hereby seek the endorsement of the Procurement Committee in utilizing the limited tender methodology to obtain quotations, and also the approval of the Procurement Committee to contract BSS for the supply of high beams for the CMU Block E building at a cost of $212,520. The $155 was for nuts and bolts, etc., and didn't have, I don't believe that that had a formal procurement process. But this is just, Mr. Chairman, just to further the argument that, to my understanding, there were two separate procurement exercises. And the second, based on the information that is there, supports the procurement exercise of 621 in furtherance of the construction of the building of Block.
AG, are you saying therefore that the 621 plus the 368 plus another 212?
It's 212 plus 151 or thereabout that aggregates to the 368.
What's the 1514?
Nuts and bolts and other support, yes. No, Mr. Chairman.
You wanted it? Go ahead, Lucas.
Thank you. And my apologies, I was a few minutes late, so I missed the beginning of Ms. Hayden's explanation. But I would ask her if I have captured the essence of it. Essentially, the original intent and the procurement was for a lecture theatre. That original objective was abandoned, and the material that had been procured up to that point, as well as the additional material, were diverted for a number of purposes, to include expansion of the engineering workshop, some work on the container building, and some work on the medical center. And there remain some portion of that material in stock, so to speak, at the CMU. Did I capture that correctly?
Yes, sir.
So essentially, the original purpose, or the original approval given by the PS to do direct contracting, even though that was exceeded, that amount was 80 million, but the amount paid to logistic company 1 was 45.37 million, in excess of the quoted figure of 80 million, for which the permanent secretary granted approval for use of the direct contracting methodology. But all this material ended up not being used for the purposes for which the approval had been given, and basically just went into the general construction purposes of the CMU. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So was no one concerned that the whole procurement guidelines of the government of Jamaica had been completely circumvented abused, worked around to spend this very substantial amount of money? Was there any subsequent, if even retroactive, approval sought from or advice given to the permanent secretary that said, hold on, we know we told you we wanted the approval to do this. We have decided to do something completely different. Can you amend your approval to reflect what we are now doing? Was there any attempt in that regard?
Member, I personally did not contact the permanent secretary. My understanding is that those discussions were had.
Your understanding was that discussions were had with the, and I know we've had a bit of a revolving door with permanent secretaries during this period. Which permanent secretary? Can you identify the permanent secretary? The
permanent secretary at the time was Dean Roy Bernard.
Was P.S. Bernard. Okay. There's a related element of this, which is the role of logistics company too, which I'd like to ask some questions on. But if anybody else wants to complete on.
We're actually in matters arising from the minutes. So, so before we go on to logistics company 2, maybe we could address the other matter arising from the minutes, which actually you had a role in questioning about, and that relates to the lunch supply arrangements for the CAPIES program. And a memo was produced and sent to the clerk and circulated to members since last week's meeting on that issue. And it makes reference in it to some correspondence, which when I checked with the clerk, she indicated was appended to this document here, but we didn't get the appendices to this document, I guess because it was already very bulky. So the clerk, very kindly made copies of that particular appendix, which is this memorandum of understanding, which I believe you may have a copy of, or some of you may have a copy of. It was circulated today. And it's a memorandum of understanding between the CMU and an entity called Optimum Customer Service Consultancy. And that company apparently is based in St. Anne. 27 Main Street, St. Anne is its given address. And this MOU is what has been put forward by the ministry as the basis for which these lunch suppliers came on board. And it says that, the memo from the ministry says that this entity, Optimum Customer Service and Consultancy, OCSC, was the one who identified the lunch suppliers. And this is, I assume, the written correspondence that was submitted in that regard. One question I have for the PS is, how was this entity identified and procured? This Optimum Customer Service and Consultancy was brought on board to deal with this. And this, I think, was in relation to the CAPIES Learning Readiness Initiative, which was one of 4 versions of CAPIES. The memo says there were 4 versions of CAPIES. One of them was the Learning Readiness Initiative, and for that one, this entity was the partner that was engaged to deliver the lunches, or at least they were the ones who identified the suppliers of the lunches. But I'm asking the question, what was the procurement process for engaging this company or this consultancy, or Optimum Customer Service and Consultancy?
Chairman, if I may say, the matter relating to the technology advancement program, which was implemented in collaboration with the MSET ministry, was where I believe the lunch suppliers were contracted based on the information I got from the team at the CMU. So Professor Ibrahim should be able to give us some further information and to identify the officer who can speak to the elements of the report based on our response in terms of how these lunch suppliers were contracted.
Okay, well, the question is, firstly, we are told in the memo from the ministry that this consultancy called Optimum Customer Service and Consultancy, OCSC, was the one that brought in these various lunch suppliers, which CMU then paid. I'm asking the question, how did the arrangement between the CMU and this consultancy originate? What was the procurement process for hiring them to do this?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The issue with Optimum Customer Service came to the fore around September last year. That was when I got to realize the arrangement with Optimum. Unfortunately, when I searched for such document that established the relationship between the two, the only thing I found is the MOU. And when I look at the content of the MOU and the type of services that Optimum Customer Service was providing for CMU, I felt very uncomfortable, and I terminated the MOU between the two entities. However, Dr. Brown is here with us, who manages the CAP and CAP-ES program, and my understanding was that the engagement of Optimum Customer Services was in relation to the Learning Readiness Initiative, which is an aspect of CAP-ES program. And unfortunately, the management of the CAP-ES program in St. Anne was not in the purview of the faculty management, headed by Dr. Cornell Brown, who is here with us. And I will ask maybe he can give a further explanation, because he actually put together the report that you have with you.
So,
Chairman, before
yes.
Dr. Brown comes in, I am hearing and at the same time trying to read this MOU. Could somebody walk us through what happened here? Who pays who? Because this MOU says, for example, individual clients will be charged at a rate of $16,250 plus GCT. Who pays that? And how does CMU get 30% of the fee, which amounts to almost $5,000 per client? Who pays out the money first? Because it can't be CMU paying over the money to this optimal customer service consultancy and then getting back 30%. Where is this money coming from?
All right, well, before we get into the details of those arrangements, I just want to understand the procurement first, which is how were they onboarded to deliver under this MOU? So, Dr. Brown, can you shed any light on that?
Thanks, Chairman. I really cannot contribute anything to how that particular entity was engaged. As you have indicated, there are 4 versions of CAP-ES. I came on board at CMU in October of 2017. And I came on board pretty much as a result of this CAP-ES program being a very problematic situation. I ran into the president at a conference, and he told me of this situation where there was funding provided, and there is a protocol document supporting this CAP-ES. Trust me, I just got a copy of it yesterday. I've been asking for it since I came on board. I remember when I came on board, I attended a meeting, and this is an agreement. CMU, the Hartrust NTA, the Ministry of Education. When I came on board in 2017, I attended the very first meeting of the stakeholders, including the funding agency. Hartrust NTA was the funding agency. At that meeting, I was told that I could not participate because I was not a signatory to the protocol document, so I sat in the back. I learned later on that there are 4 versions of CAP-ES. The one that I have responsibility for is the one that is resident at CMU, and according to the information I got, and it's now backed up by this protocol document, funding was provided to train 600 individuals. And I'm not sure what copy of this is with you, but it says 200 in Kingston and St. Andrew, 200 for St. Catherine, 50 for Clarendon, 50 for Montego Bay, 50 for Westmoreland, and I hope I got the numbers right. The Kingston and St. Andrew group, I understood back then, was supposed to be resident at the Jamaica Theological Seminary. The St. Catherine group would have been resident at Heidel. Yes, I visited with Heidel and there was a training going on. I have been searching since I came on board for the group that is supposed to be at the Jamaica Theological Seminary. I was told that the training ended abruptly and the participants were dislocated. I went to the president because my aim was to fix. He had told me that the situation was problematic. I hope this is appropriate, Chairman, but you will recall in your role as Member of Parliament, I met with yourself and the principal at Trenchtown because I told the President that I would rather situate the program in an entity that is really up and running and can treat with this particular target group. When we went to that location, I was guided by the Trenchtown Polytechnic principal president, I hope I'm getting it right. When we spoke about the lunch arrangement, she said to me, Mr. Brown, what I'm recommending that you do not provide lunch. Because the arrangement was for them to be given lunch money and then, given lunch and then given some money separately to pay for transportation. She recommended that we pay the money to them. And again, you are part of those discussions, and we made arrangement to send those monies over to Trenchtown, and they administered that. So there was no lunch arrangement with any supplier. For the St. Catherine location, it is my understanding when I did my own investigation that there was a lunch supplier initially. Subsequently, that wasn't working out, and I was told that the arrangement was moved and the lunch was being provided by the concessionaire at the nearby police station. So I say that to say the version of CAPIES that I have responsibility for, none of these private providers are associated with. And as a matter of fact, except for that Heidel location, all the other locations, Kingston and St. Andrew, when we started that, Clarendon started under my watch, Montego Bay started under my watch, and again, at each location I met with the head person for the institution that we were going to be situating the training, and importantly, the political representatives. Good, and we have all kind of pictures to back that up. Good. So, and all those locations that started under my watch, I was guided by the Trenchtown Polytechnic principal, and I said, you know what, let us work out an arrangement with the training location. They have a bursar's office, we send the fund and let them pay the stipend. Good? So I understand that this particular version of CAPIES that the private providers provided lunch for was run by Optimum. I'm a little bit surprised that the Deputy President is unaware of Optimum, because when I came on board also, I had a meeting with the President, the Deputy President and other people, and that is where Optimum was introduced to me. And that I should, because the faculty was supposed to partner with Optimum to attend to additional training interventions. I have, in addition to that, in addition to the CAPIES, there is, I don't know if you are in, this is for a separate BPO training that Optimum attended to on behalf of CMU. And this is signed off by the Deputy President and Optimum. So a little bit of amnesia setting in, and I don't know why. It came to my attention, nothing was mentioned about Optimum. Good? So the versions of CAPIES that came to the fore later on, it is indicated that Optimum runs one of those 4 versions. Mm-hmm. The version that I a responsibility for the one that's guided by this protocol document that recruited the 600 people.
Do you know which one that is? Because of the 4?
This is the one that awards the NVQ level 1 and 2.
Okay.
Good.
CAPIAS NVQ level 1 and 2.
Yes, that is the substantial one. It's the one that I have full awareness
I don't think
of.
our focus is that one. Our focus is really based on, this is, when I say our focus, member Bunting had raised the issue about the lunch supply arrangements, which seem to include many lunch suppliers from a particular constituency in St. Anne. And he had asked as to how those arrangements had been originated. And then the ministry provided this memo to us, which explained the background that there were these 4 components to CAPIAS, and that the one that member Bunting had been asking questions in relation to was really the Learning Readiness Initiative, which was the one that was handled through this arrangement with Optimum. And that Optimum was the one who identified the lunch suppliers. So my question to the PS, which was then relayed to Professor Ajaguna, which was then relayed to you, was how was Optimum brought into the picture? That's the question on the table. And from what you're saying, you don't really know the answer to that.
I would not be able to answer that.
All right. Any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I as you reminded us, I was the one who asked about this last week. And what I don't understand, when I'm looking at the response that was provided in writing, it speaks about training in St. Catherine, the programs the training being delivered in parishes not even adjacent to St. Anne. But yet all the lunch suppliers or the ones that we can identify a location for, are primarily from Northwest St. Anne. Could you explain that?
Sure, but remember, again, you're right. Let me just indicate again. The lunch providers for this CAPIAS intervention, those private lunch providers, are not in any way associated with the version of CAPIAS that is run by the faculty that I have responsibility for.
Okay, but where is the information on that version? Because there's no sense in giving us. We're asking questions about related to the lunch provisions there, and you giving us the information for lunch arrangements for a different version. I want the related version of CAPIAS, the information from the related version of CAPIAS.
Which is why I'm saying, member, that I cannot answer that question because I have no responsibility for that particular program.
But the CMU must have documentation.
What are the
I mean, it's an institution. It would have records. It must. The Ministry of Education must have had records of the arrangements.
Yeah, if I can jump in, the understanding is, Member Bunting, there are 4 versions of CAPIAS. 2 versions are actually administered, coordinated, managed by the CMU main campus. Good. Of those 2 versions on the main campus, I have substantive responsibility for 1. The second is run by the Faculty of Marine and Nautical Studies, right? Which all target at-risk youth. That particular version that's run by Marine, I know they were on campus. I know the training was going on. Version 3, which is the learning readiness, the understanding that I have, and I have only the understanding that it's run by a private provider that CMU engaged in a partnership with. There is a MOU with Optimum. The Deputy President just indicated that he terminated the MOU. So for whatever reason, CMU engaged with Optimum, and Optimum was assigned responsibility for this learning readiness version of CAPIAS. That version does not report to me.
So then that indicates that you're not really the person we should be asking to answer these questions. So, Prof, going back to you, who is the person with knowledge as to the arrangement with Optimum, the origin of it?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And as I indicated earlier on, the dynamism for youth at risk, I do not have that capability. And when that program came on, I said to the president specifically that I have too many things to manage, 5 faculties, the registry, the library, and the student affairs. And for me to be monitoring the youth at risk across the island was going to be a difficult one for me. Osric Forest was initially in charge of those programs. Osric Forest was in charge of that school, and then Dr. Brown came and took up that responsibility. And actually, Dr. Brown was introduced to us as a specialist in that area, and I must say that he has been doing excellently well for those programs he has been managing, including TAP 1000 and TAP 2019. But that initial arrangement and discussion with Optimum rests with the former president.
Go ahead.
So you're saying that the agreement with Optimum was signed by the president?
Well, MOU was signed by the president, but I don't know if there was any other arrangement in writing that brought both units
And the
together.
individual who was in charge of that program, is that individual still employed to CMU?
Mr. Forrest was the head of that faculty, so he left and then he was replaced by Dr. Brown.
So who was managing the program with Optimum after Forrester left and Dr. Brown took
In
over?
fact, sincerely, I will tell you that I don't even know if Optimum existed while Osric was there.
Dr. Brown, when you say you started at, when?
The date of the MOU is the 13th of March, 2018.
2018.
So,
Osric
13th
was
of
no
March,
longer there then?
2018. So it seems that this was conceived and executed within CMU, but not through, according to Dr. Brown, the structure that he was given responsibility for and was running. And I am aware of that aspect of it because Trenchtown Polytechnic was involved in some of the delivery of some I believe it the CAPS, was it CAPS program, and we had a discussion at the initiation of that to try and find youngsters who would take advantage of the program and how the stipend, etc. would work. So I'm familiar with that. But what we don't seem to have is anyone in the room who can answer about this arrangement with Optimum.
Oh, well, why? Just ask a question to Dr. Brown. When did you say you started at CMU?
October 2017.
All right, and Chair, reason being, I'm looking back at a report that was given to us at the PAAC from CMU, where Optimal was engaged up to January 2019. Yeah? And this shows the programs that they were engaged in. Some of the programs at the main campus, Montego Bay Satellite Campus, off-site at Quality Academics, main campus, CMU, Montego Bay, Burnt Savannah off-site, various Rockabessa Satellite. So if it is that when Dr. Brown started then in 2017, obviously there were still programs being run by Optimal. And I find it very strange that we can't get an answer of who was running the program. Was it being run directly out of the president's office during that overlap period? Because Dr. Brown started in 2017. But yet still programs were being run with Optimal even up until the point of this report in 2019, June 2019.
Yes.
So who was in charge? Because they couldn't be running a program alone. Or was it that the consultant, Othniel Lawrence, was in charge of the program? Who?
Well, to my recollection, I remember, immediately after Ostrich left, Dr. Brown came in. And I am the vice president in charge of faculties, but none of the program in that faculty did I have purview of or responsibility for. So the director of the School of Academics then was reporting directly to the president, and when he left, Dr. Brown also reported directly.
But if Dr. Brown
president.
is still getting bills or communication with the entity, then obviously there's still something in place, or there are bills. It's untidy. Participants at all locations. This is with 181 participants. Yeah? And this is Montego Bay satellite also. August 27 to 31st at all locations. CMU main campus, CMU Montego Bay satellite, CMU Burn Savannah, off-site. Right? 18, 20, 19. I can get copies of this one. Right? Who then, up until when Doc came, who he said that he wasn't responsible for these programs, that was being managed by the entity. So who at the university was?
Well, I would want to know who put that document together.
I would, orderly, can you just pass this one, please, to Prof.
I think all. Yes, I think all of us would love to see that document. But, Mr. Chairman, the Auditor General, the list of the launch suppliers for the CAPIAS program, which I'm gathering is just for this optimum delivered CAPIAS program, were paid $46.7 million. Can anyone tell us how much was Optimum paid for actually delivering the training under this element of the program?
Just to clarify, Chairman, if I may, just to clarify, CAPIAS is not the only intervention that Optimum attends to at CMU. I indicated that there's one version of the CAPIAS that Optimum, per the information that I have in my possession, Optimum has responsibility for. Optimum, I indicated that this document I'm looking on is dated February 2019. This is our separate intervention that Optimum was engaged by CMU to attend to. So Optimum, even the CAP program, not CAPIAS, Optimum was engaged to deliver a residential camp aspect of CAPIAS and also to deliver specific interventions on the CAP program. So there are several interventions at Optimum. And again, Optimum was introduced to me on my, about November when I came on board at CMU. I was called to a meeting and I was introduced to Optimum, and I was told that it's a partner entity and they would be working with CMU to reach additional unattached at-risk individual. So I am not throwing Optimum on the bus because I know Optimum has acted professionally in terms of how they have gone about training. And like I've said, Chairman, I am right now being inundated with requests from Optimum, all because my faculty is the faculty that Optimum was assigned to do work. But I have no role in contracting Optimum. But Optimum is reaching out to me because they are requesting their payment. So it is a little bit strange that the Deputy President is totally unaware as to how Optimum came on board.
Mr. Chair, yes, having perused this document, you also realize that programs for which Optimum was involved was not limited to CAP years, as Dr. Brown just indicated. It also included CSJP, it also included CAP as well. So, in the preparation of this document, I will say that I'm not very privy to it. Otherwise, I should have a recollection of the content of the program itself. And sincerely, I think what Dr. Brown indicated a while ago in respect of Optimum, when Optimum came up to get involved in additional programs, for which I was not very comfortable, that was when I asked for that MOU, and we brought that MOU to a close.
Right, Mr. Chairman, all I'm trying to ascertain, we got a table last week from the Auditor General. On the first and second page, it had a list of 15 suppliers of lunches for the CAP Yes program. The question I had asked that it came up in the matters arising was how were these chosen? But I think technically it was what process was undertaken to select the lunch suppliers. We were told now that it was Optimum who selected the lunch suppliers. And these suppliers were paid $46.7 million. I think we may have to invite Optimum to attend the PAC, since nobody who is here is able to say how this process was carried out. But I asked further, if the $46.7 million was paid for lunches, how much was paid for the substantive services that Optimum was delivering, where this lunch was incidental to the delivery of the training? And is there anyone here who can answer that question? And I understand that Optimum may have had different contracts over time, but this is specific to providing lunches for the CAP Yes program. So whatever payments have been made to them related to training under the CAP Yes program is what I'm trying to get an answer for.
Who's the Associate Vice President of the Faculty of Advanced Skills and Professional Development? Who's that person? That would be Chairman. That's you, okay. All right. Chairman. And it says here that payments were to be made based on memoranda from the Associate Vice President in the Faculty of Advanced Skills and Professional Development to the University Treasurer. Please use this as support to allow for payment of monthly sums to supply and to the supplier's name for the provision of meals. Meals are being provided for a certain number of students for 5 days per week. The negotiated rate for each month will be, and then the monthly figure would be included. I'm reading from page 24 of the Auditor General's report. It's probably worth just reading the paragraph. CMU paid an aggregate $46.7 million to 15 lunch suppliers over the period January to December 2018 under the Technology Advancement Program, TAP, and the Career Advancement Program, Youth Employment Solution, CAP Yes program. And table 4 below is the list of the different amounts paid to the different suppliers of lunches. Invoices. For the CAP Yes program, payments were to be made based on memoranda from the Associate Vice President in the Faculty of Advanced Skills and Professional Development to the University Treasurer, which stated, and this is a quote from the memoranda, please use this as support to allow payment of monthly sums to supplier name, for the provision of meals. Meals are being provided for number of students for 5 days per week. The negotiated rate for each month will be, and the monthly figure included. That is what the report is here saying. Yes, Dr. Gant.
I have a few questions relating to the lunch matter. The figure that we have been seeing, or we have seen, based on this that has come from the CMU in response to comments and questions, spoke to a uniform amount of $1,200 per lunch, which in the whole scheme of things seem quite a bit for lunch. $1,200 for each lunch, right? And secondly, Chairman, there is a significant amount built into the invoices for transportation. So you have persons from from St. Catherine, Paul Mountain, providing lunch for people at the Caribbean Maritime University tuck shop. You have persons from Mineral Heights going to Caribbean Maritime University tuck shop to provide lunch. Now, all of these lunches are $1,200 per lunch, which seemed to be a price that was never negotiated, but just given to each of the providers. And secondly, why would you want to give contracts to persons far removed from the venue that you are proposing to have these sessions, and to pay them a significant transportation cost to get the lunches there? One. Two, if you look at that document which was provided, and when you compare it with the AG's report on page 24, table 4, supplier number 1 at Rio Blanco, St. Anne, provided lunches for persons literally all over the country through other contracts that he would have made based on the report here with suppliers in the respective places. And the argument that is given to us is that other suppliers were not willing to enter into any contract to provide lunches up front because they were not sure of the source of their funding. Now, that is not how you operate a business, especially when you're a custodian for state resources. If it's your own business, then probably you can do it the way you want to do it, but certainly not with state resources. And it comes back to the point I asked earlier, Chairman, which you agree that will be discussed later. Where is it that the funding comes from for these? Because if CMU enters into a contract with Optimum, then certainly CMU would be required to pay Optimum. But we see here where Optimum is getting X amount and the CMU will receive 30% of that. Just where is that money coming from? Can somebody answer that question? Which section of the Ministry of Education? Because it would give me better clarity in terms of how I view this. Oh.
Yeah, but let's just get an answer to this first. What are the arrangements in relation to this whole this situation with the supplier that provided the services under which these lunch suppliers were engaged? We've been told that Hart NTA was a funding agency, but what was the arrangement in terms of, for example, Optimum under this MOU? How would it work? How would the whole thing work? Dr. Brown, maybe you could help us, because as you said, Optimum does a range of different things, but we're trying to get an understanding of how the basic arrangement is set out in terms of who is paid for doing what.
Can you repeat the last part of what you just said?
With these programs that are funded by HEART NTA, what is the role of CMU? What is the role of Optimum, say, in terms of who gets paid to do what?
And just to clarify, Chairman, the HEART Trust NTA, my mention in the HEART Trust NTA is in relation to the CAP, yes. Good. And again, I just got this, what I call a protocol document, and the funding was for 600 individuals to be trained Highland-wide. This document? CAP started in 2016, long before I got to see it. This is the date on this.
With the funding that is provided by HEART NTA.
CMU, per the documentation, has responsibility for implementing the training interventions. And this CAP, yes, is an extension of the CAP program, the Career Advancement Program, which caters for, and the PS can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's persons who are age 16 to 18 for CAP. CAP, yes, and the document is saying that it caters to individuals who are 17 to 29. And I am, if I may, I'm reading from the document itself. It's indicating, Chairman, and the awareness is there. This CAP, yes, was supposed to be targeting individuals in hotspot areas, because a part of my responsibilities per the instructions given to me is that we were instructed to go into different communities, and we were supposed to recruit individuals who are engaged in things that are pretty much untoward, because the CAP, yes, was supposed to be a rescue mission. So, to answer your question precisely, CMU's responsibility was to implement. The understanding is that there were 4 versions under the umbrella of implementation. Of those 4 versions, one is that which is resident in the faculty that I am associated with. There's another one that I know that's on campus that the marine faculty has responsibility for.
So where the MOU speaks to individual clients being charged at a rate of 16,250 Jamaican dollars plus GCT to attend each course, the individual youth wouldn't be charged that. That would be the charge that Optimum would charge the program for that, and then CMU would get a percentage of that. Is that how it worked?
There's no charge to the CAP yes participants. Right. The MOU with Optimum, and again, not all the interventions attended to by Optimum falls under that MOU, but the MOU with Optimum speaks to a business partnership where Optimum would conduct training, CMU would award certification, and there should be a profit sharing arrangement. That is the MOU.
And so in that arrangement, per student or per participant, there's an amount that the funding agency would pay out for each, let's say it's 600 you're trying to do, there would be an agreed rate that HEART NTA would pay for having done the training for those youngsters. And that would be what would be split between CMU and your partner. Well, this is saying, this MOU said that 30% is what CMU was to get. I don't know. You're not clear on this financial side of it.
No, Chairman, I am. Except I know that per the MOU with Optimum, and again, I'm not a signatory to the MOU, but it's my understanding that Optimum would be operating as a training provider in partnership with CMU, and there would be a profit sharing arrangement, and the profit sharing arrangement on the CMU end would really support revenue generation.
Yes, Ms. Hannah. Member Hannah.
The difficulty that I really have sitting for the CMU, I remember when I was Minister of Youth, CMU, well, CMI at the time, was one of those institutions that we... Bear with me, Mr. Chairman.
Something wrong with the parliament this morning. Chairman, you need to sort it out.
This one isn't working either. Somebody's mic on?
No, don't.
No, that one is always.
All of them are on. All right, the concern I have, and I'm going straight to PS. PS, when there was a time when CMI was moving at a speed where even the institution would market itself because 7 out of 10 persons, even before they graduated, were getting jobs. You remember that period of CMI?
Yes.
Right, and so people respected CMI. When you saw the CMI students in their white uniforms and when they were coming, you really looked up and you really had a sense of pride because they were going places. They tell me, because all of us know the CAP program. In addition to the CAP program and this protocol being established on March 24, 2017, P.S. What is the needy student support framework?
Okay, so I'm not sure if I'm 100% clear regarding the question, member, but I will attempt to.
Try and frame the question a little bit.
Okay.
Obviously, this payment for optimum had to be approved somewhere, correct?
Yes.
And based on all of the conversations and discussions that we've been having this morning, it seems that the president was running the institution out of his office, correct? Because most of the persons who have commented either don't know about the information or they reported directly to the president, and the president would unilaterally change structures, systems, etc. And perhaps give memos instructing people as to what to do. Correct?
Yes, you're correct.
Are you in receipt of a memo from the president for January 5th, 2020, asking that the payment for optimum be taken from the needy student support framework and that the arrangements for payment should be from that framework and that the engagement should be paid and the arrangements should be paid accordingly?
Member, January 5, 2020, I would have to check to verify that that is so. But just to say that outside of the CAP, yes, and the CAP program, which I will explain a little more, there is a structured scholarship program or assistance for tertiary students that we currently have at the ministry. One is supported by an MOU that was signed in 2017 with the ministry and the CMU, to which we provide an amount for students.
All right, stop a second. Maybe the question is not for you.
Okay.
Dr. Brown, since you are in charge of the CAP-S program, were you at any time instructed by the president to make payments to optimum? Let me try.
Good. Not to make payments, member, but there is a cover memo and there are supporting memos instructing the faculty to sanction payments to optimum or to loan suppliers via optimum, or that were loan suppliers that were identified by optimum.
And this documentation came from the president, Dr. Fritz Pinnock, and what date, what around that time, because you came in October 2017, when would he have instructed you to make those payments?
If my memory serves me right, I think that is somewhere in March 2018.
She said January 5, 2020.
I don't have the benefit of the document, but I know it was in the earlier part.
That would be you. That would be you.
Excuse me, a point of clarification. Did you say 2020?
No, no, sir. I am asking about correspondence. If at all the PS got correspondence about making payments to Optimum, and whether or not those payments should have been made from the Needy Student Support Framework. She says she has to go through and look. Then I asked Dr. Brown if, as a head of that unit, if he at any time received memoranda of understanding or correspondence from the President stating that arrangements and payments should be made to Optimum. And if so, when were those instructions given, and what route should the payments be made through? Because if he has it, she should have it.
January 5, 2020, remember?
I don't know when the document was, I don't know when the document per se was done. But what I'm saying is there should be some directive. If the PAC has it, PAAC has it, that these things are happening with Optimum, if there's a memorandum, and if we've all agreed here that the President was running the institution unilaterally, he would have had to give those instructions the same way he gave Ms. Hayden. And I'm asking, where is the document that exists with those instructions? And if you have it, PS. Because Dr. Brown says that he's aware because he was told to make the payments through Optimum.
So remember, there is a memorandum when we were doing the investigations that Dr. Brown brought to my attention that was written under the signature of the President, asking him to ensure that the payments are processed or something to that effect. I will have to go through the evidence documents and see if I can pick up that memo that was done. But that was told to me when we were doing the investigation. Dr. Brown, you could perhaps shed some light on that. Dr. Brown actually indicated that he had no relationship or information regarding Optimum except for the memo that he was asked to facilitate in terms of the payment, since apparently the Optimum seemed to have been classified as a part of his faculty.
So there is evidence in the institution that payments should have been made and a relationship should have been had, PS?
Based on the information I received from the team member.
Dr. Brown, because, and this is why I say it pains me, because I remember CMU well, and the logistics seem to be out of sync and everybody seems to be working in silos. But obviously coming out of this meeting, especially today, I am confident that the President of the institution was running the institution unilaterally. Do you have the information to you instructing you to make payments to Optimum?
I have a copy of the memo in question, member, and said was shared with it, and I was instructed that I needed to provide that kind of information for submission to the PAC, and I submitted accordingly.
Do you remember what the President would have said to you?
Well, I have a copy of the document in question.
Mr. Chairman, can you allow him to read the document? Or, sorry.
Thanks. So, I mean, what the Auditor General's report makes reference to is a memo, a memoranda from you in your capacity as Associate Vice President in the Faculty of Advanced Skills and Professional Development to the University Treasurer, saying, please use this as support to make payments to the lunch suppliers. So I think Member Hannah's question to is, that memo that you sent to the university treasurer, what was the base upon which you did that?
Well, that particular, those submissions, because it's not one, and the copies of those should be around, those submissions would have indicated each one, apparently, is linked to a particular loan supplier. And it's indicating to the Treasury to make payments to that particular supplier. And it gives the recurrent period, which is a little bit unusual because even if there is an initial memo or anything in writing to a linking a supplier to the payment system, there should have been an invoice that was sent in subsequent to that. But apparently for this arrangement, it was a memo or memos that were sent to the faculty, and we were asked to endorse. But there's a cover memo, Chairman, which is really what I think you need to get a hold of. And this cover memo gives instructions relative to those memos that should have gone to the Treasury.
And that cover memo was issued by who?
That cover memo is from the Office of the President to me.
Well, that's from the Office of the President to you?
Yes.
And then on the basis of that covering memo, that's on the basis of which the sort of supplemental memos.
But it was instructing me to act.
I see. Okay. So do we have copies of that?
Copies of everything was submitted.
Okay.
Copy of the memo.
A copy of that you can read to us?
I believe I have a copy, Chairman. I'm just asking a member of my staff to identify in the documents that were submitted.
Okay.
We could just see the covering memo that from the President's office to the Associate Vice President, pursuant to which subsequent actions were taken to authorize specific payments by subsequent memoranda from the Associate Vice President to the Treasury. If we could just see that chain, so we get a better understanding of all of that. So, and then, Member Bunting, you were suggesting that we ask Optimum to appear so they could explain to us how, on what basis they identified the suppliers of the lunches.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, because the documentation before us here, for example, the Memorandum of Understanding, which is very pale and not so easy to read, but I couldn't find any reference to procuring or supplying lunches in this Memorandum of Understanding, outside of seeing at the back some invoices.
Well, I think that's the memo that we need to see.
In the two and a half page memorandum, I not only can I not find any reference to lunches. When you read it carefully, and obviously we just got it, or I just saw it this morning, so I've been through it quickly. But what it really seems to be doing is facilitating this consultancy delivering services or delivering training which will subsequently be certified by CMU, and CMU gets 30% of the cost of the training. And it's very generic. It's not something that's specific to TAP or CAP, and it speaks to individual clients versus corporate clients. It speaks to student engagement, etc., etc. But it's exactly because, it says individual clients will be charged at a rate of 16,250 Jamaican dollars plus GC to attend each course. The CMU will receive 30% of the fee, $4,875, for its affiliation with a training service. So this is not really, as I said, all this apparently does is license Optimum to deliver training which will then be certified by CMU. And it's quite unusual because it doesn't seem to limit it. It doesn't seem to specify any standards that Optimum must achieve. It isn't very specific about what the training is, etc. Or even who is to be invoiced, which really suggests to me at the end of the day, Mr. Chairman, that this is not specific to the CAPSR TAP program. This is some more general arrangement between Optimum and Caribbean Maritime University.
Thank you, Chairman. Dr. Brown indicated earlier on in his presentation that the same 30% you're referring to, Chairman, would go to CMU for income generation, was the term that he used. Prof, are you aware of any funds reaching the Caribbean Maritime University out of this 30%? And secondly, were any members of Caribbean Maritime University paid additional amount above and over their regular salary from the CMU for doing work in this particular area?
Yeah. Excuse me. I am not very sure. I have to go and check with the Treasury Department if we have received, if the university has received any money through Optimum, but I have no knowledge of anything of such. So give me the opportunity to research that, and I will revert.
But could you answer the second part of it? Or maybe the AG would have, based on the auditing done at the institution, to say whether this is so or not. The second part was, do you know of any member of staff receiving above their usual salary from CMU, additional salaries related for their stewardship, for want of a better word, for the CAP program?
In respect of the CAP program? Yes. Are we speaking in respect of the CAP program?
CAP, yes.
CAP, yes. I'm not so sure, but maybe if you say CAP.
Anyone?
Yeah, I will say yes.
You could say yes?
Yes.
Okay. And could we be provided with that information at the next meeting? Could you research it?
Yes, sir.
And whilst you're on matters arising, Chairman, there's another matter that the professor is supposed to research and report back to the committee, that is on page 4 as it relates to documents as the institute as a board. Dr. Guy said there ought to have been meetings of the board. You only asked why the minutes for 2018-19 have been forwarded to the ministry and what happened to the previous 2 years. Professor asked that the CMU be allowed to review the documents, but recall that there were board meetings held prior to the CMI becoming a university. He would do some research and report back to the committee. So that as well, sir.
Okay, sir.
Thank you.
So just to clarify the request, that request is from last week about board minutes, etc., from the earlier period. But also whether the question was whether individuals within the CMU were paid in addition to their regular salaries for their work that they did in the CAPS program, so that, and how much that was. And I think the question for us members is, can we agree that we will invite Optimum to come so they can explain to us their understanding of this whole lunch program that they were providing through suppliers and the basis upon which they were engaged to do it, and indeed the entirety of the arrangement that they had with CMU, because it's very unclear. Yeah.
And just looking back at the report here, that was our response given by the Ministry of Education. And with the suppliers, the caterers. Because, and I just want a little clarity, the TAP program that is under your watch, Dr. Brown, and you had said that the CAPS program for Montego Bay would have been under a different supervision.
No. The version of CAPS that I have responsibility for.
Can you use the mic?
Okay, the version of CAPIES that I had responsibility for, that intervention was delivered at 5 or 6 locations, including Montego Bay. And that would have included the 600 individuals that were supposed to be funded under the arrangement with the Hartress NTA.
All right, and under that program, was lunch to be provided or they got a stipend?
All right. Remember, I indicated, members, that when I came on board, the St. Catherine location was up and running. They were at Hydel, and a lunch arrangement was in place. The Kingston and St. Andrew location, which apparently was at the Jamaica Theological Seminary, it came to my understanding that training had abruptly ended and the participants were displaced. I reestablished that training at Trenchtown. And at Trenchtown, instead of putting in place a lunch arrangement, I acted on the recommendation of the Trenchtown principal and we gave them the stipend instead. So CMU would have passed the money over to Trenchtown and they administered the payment. And I'm sure the AG would have picked that up in their investigation. St. James, coming out of Trenchtown and the guidance from the principal, I instructed that a similar arrangement be done in St. James. We paid them the stipend as opposed to doing a lunch arrangement. We did the same thing for Clarendon. Westmoreland was already up and running when I came on board, and I understand a lunch arrangement was in place. So,
you're saying that it was a peculiar type of arrangement because unlike other things that you have seen, there were no invoices. You just received a memo instructing you to make payments to this company that the university had arrangements with, and you received that memo from the president. That is why we seem to be having a back and forthing discussion on the matter. So the instruction came without any other supporting documents. You were just instructed that you must enter into this thing with these people.
Well, the instruction was to endorse the memos that were being sent to the Treasury. And it was on the basis which is why it's going to be beneficial to the committee chairman that cover memo be found. Because those are the instructions on which the faculty, we were instructed to act.
Just for clarity, that covering memorandum, as it's been referred to, which was from the President's office to you, to endorse memoranda going forward to initiate payments through the Treasury, those payments were to the suppliers, not to Optimum. Not to Optimum, to the suppliers.
But what I'm trying to get, the program in St. James, and I'm targeting at St. James, the CAPIES program between January and December 2018 was under your watch. All right. And for that program, those students were given stipend for meals and transportation. Yeah? Because I'm coming back to the memorandum here or the response by the Ministry of Education, because it says here, St. James training took place at CMU Freeport Satellite Campus for over the period of January to October 20. There was no lunch arrangement. It states here also that this CAPIES Level 1 and 2 training to the targeted parishes were St. Catherine, Kingston, St. Andrew, Clarendon, St. James, and Westmoreland. My memory serves me well that on page 24, table 4, where it states Councillor 1 as one of the lunch providers, which is Kim Brown Lawrence,
And in a previous committee, we were told that she supplied lunches to the Montego Bay campus for the CAPS program. We are also seeing here where supplier number 7, Regal Caterers, also was paid a sum to supply lunches for the TAP program for St. James. But yet still, and this is totaling $2.6 million, $1.6 million between the two. So my question is really, Chairman, if there was no lunch supplied for the CAPS program, nor the TAP program in St. James, then what were these two suppliers paid for to supply students or themselves or what? Yeah? Because, yeah?
Right. Member Phillips, the CAPS program at the Montego Bay CMU satellite location is the one that I had responsibility for. That falls under what we call version 1, which those students were targeting the NVQJ level 1 and 2. The CAPS that is linked to the lunch supplier you have referenced is separate and apart from this CAPS. That is the one that Optimum apparently had responsibility for sourcing suppliers. Totally separate intervention.
But this is saying that there was no lunch supply.
There was no lunch supplier for the Montego Bay training that falls under the faculty.
Well, see where the confusion is now, Chairman. Because again, there is a duplication of programs taking place. One is Optimum, one is run by CMU. Because if you go by documentations that we have gotten, is that there are different funding sources of the CAPS program. So one was done through the university itself, one was done through HEART, and you have other, right? No, right? But you are saying to me that there was a feeding program with Optimum, their program for St. James, but there was none with you, but yet still the report here only mentions one program coming from the Ministry of Education, which is a program between January to December 2018, which is when the Councillor 1 provided meals valued at $1.66 million.
Remember, what is the training location provided for that?
St. James.
No specific location?
Satellite campus. Freeport Satellite Campus.
And it is in, I'm not aware of that. It's indicating that lunch was provided.
So did you also receive lunches for your TAP program then, which is under your watch for $204,000?
TAP, certainly. Not CAPS, at Freeport.
I'm asking about the TAP.
Yes.
You received lunches?
No, we provided lunches for the TAP students. That's a separate intervention.
Yeah.
Not CAPS.
And who was the supplier then?
For Montego Bay, I don't have the benefit of the document right now, but it was not the person you have indicated.
All right. Can I then ask the chairman, the permanent secretary, if some clarity can be given to the CAPS program? How many CAPS programs were being run in Montego Bay in St. James? And if there was if there was a second program or a first program, what was the arrangements made for the students?
We are told that Regal Caterers is supplier 7. Regal Caterers is located in Montego Bay, and Regal Caterers was paid $204,000 in respect of lunches under TAP, for TAP, right? So that's the TAP, $204,000 for Regal Caterers. Then there is the program which apparently the CMU ran itself in Montego Bay, for which there no lunches were provided. It was a stipend-based system. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
But again, just to clarify, remember, Phillips, that CAPS program run by, I mean, not just the C, because they all fall under the umbrella of CMU. But the CAPS that is run by the Faculty of Advanced Skills in Montego Bay, I am saying for that CAPS, we did not provide them with lunch. The CAPIES, the learning readiness, the CAPIES learning readiness, which Optimum is associated with, that is the one that
Yeah, but I have no record of Optimum running, so that is why I want clarity.
Neither do I.
Exactly, because 1.6 to Councillor 1, which was contracted as a caterer. We have been told in previous committees that she supplied lunches to the St. James campus for the CAPIES program.
CAPIES learning readiness.
This just said CAPIES. That you getting into technical. I am just wanting to know. If lunches were supplied, yes or no. That's all I want to know. If the money was spent on lunches or it was just spent. That's all I'm trying to clarify. And I only have on record here one CAPIES program which was run between January to December 2018, in which lunch was provided then. If you are saying to me that that is a CAPIES program that you were in charge of, between those dates, then you are saying to me that no lunch was provided for in that program. So I'm trying to determine, then what was it provided for? You're assuming that it was provided for another CAPIES program. I don't have anything to say that it was or not. So I would like that clarity.
But Mr. Chairman, following from Member Phillips's question, because I keep hearing the CMU, including the Deputy President, saying, look, we don't have knowledge of this because it is the President who kept sending us instructions as to changes and memos and instructions on top of instructions. So even if he has the information to make payments, I'm getting the sense that your hands were tied?
The response, member, I'm saying that the only CAPIES version that I can account for is that which I was given instructions to provide coordination for. The date of the program, well, again, remember, I'm going to sort of be repeating, but remember, we are talking about 5 or 6 cohorts, because it was 600 students spread across the island, 200 for St. Catherine, 200 for Kingston and St. 50 for Montego Bay.
I'm focusing on Montego Bay.
Montego Bay. The document is 50 for Montego Bay. That training falls under my watch at Freeport. The coordinator is Mr. Boyd Buckner, who I brought on board.
And you said 50.
Well, that's what the protocol document said. It was 50 was assigned. I cannot tell you now because I'm not looking at the actual enrollment. But per the documentation, we were told that Montego Bay was assigned 50, a number 50, which means we should have recruited 50 for Montego Bay. Good? The recruitment might have fell below or certainly not above.
And again, you provided no lunch.
For that particular training, I acted on the recommendation of the Trenchtown principal, having gone to a meeting with her and having been guided that given the particular group you're targeting, it might be best you pay them the stipend as opposed to going into a lunch arrangement.
Good.
So, Dr. Brown, if you are in charge of the unit and you are brought on to be in charge of this unit, when the decisions are taken in the President's office, are you included in those meetings as to determine protocol documents, memos of instruction? Did you have discussions as to how the project could go forward? Because I keep going back to the instructions that the President keeps giving. Because it seems to me that it was a top-down approach, even though there were managers employed at the various levels. You were only instructed, so you were not made privy before to the planning of the programs?
The planning of the CAPIES program, the implementation, because it dates back to 2016. That is when the CAPIES initiative was
I'm speaking specifically to the instructions from the President. So in other words, the PS said the memo is January 5th for the instructions for payment.
Right.
Then you're saying you got a protocol on March 24th.
No, that was, I look back, it's actually, because I have a copy of it saved, it's actually January.
That is a memo?
The memo, yes. That I am,
can you read the memo?
If I am permitted to, I certainly will.
Go ahead, read it, because we don't have a copy of it.
Let me get into my... All right, let me do this, do that. Minister, you guys have found the memo, is it? Still haven't found it? Okay, good. All right, let me go from the very top. It says CMU Office of the President, memorandum, and it says to Dr. Cornell Brown, AVP, from Professor Fritz Pinnock. The date is January 5, 2018. And the subject says, support for special CAPIAS intervention facilitated by Optimum Customer Service and Consultancy. We good so far? All right, now we get into kindly receive for your endorsement drafted memorandums, each indicating the payment arrangement that has been entered into with the individuals by Optimum Customer Service, the individuals identified by Optimum Customer Service as providers of meals of various training locations. The support is being provided by the CMU under the Needy Student Support Framework. It is consistent with the level of support agreed to with Optimum specific to the CAPIAS intervention that they, as a partner entity, have agreed to deliver and coordinate. Are we good? Last paragraph. On the basis that the overall CAPIAS intervention is situated in the Faculty of Advanced Skills and Professional Studies, kindly sign/endorse each memorandum and submit same to the Office of the Treasury. Full stop.
Mr. Member Clark had wanted to ask something.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Dr. Brown. Earlier you made mention that whilst carrying out your duties, and you made mention of St. James that you met with the political directorate. Am I correct?
Yes, I did. Members of.
Sorry?
Members of. Should have said. The political directorate.
So you did not meet with all 5?
Say that again?
You did not meet with all 5?
No, I do not recall because you were not at the meeting that I
was never invited. Very sure. I have a program. I speak positively about the program that are in my constituency. Greenpoint High School is one of the sites that is being used, right. But I was never contacted. I spoke to the permanent secretary on more than one occasion about it.
Right.
It's just that I sat here and heard you mention that statement, and it was a little bit surprising. But well, anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. Dr. Guy, you had a question? So I listened to the last paragraph, which said there was an arrangement for delivery and coordination of the meals.
Or delivery and coordination of the training?
No, read the last paragraph again for me, please.
So delivery and coordination is the second to last paragraph.
Yes,
you want me to revisit that
paragraph.
One?
Go ahead.
It says the support is being provided by CMU under the Needy Student Support Framework. It is consistent with the level of support agreed to with Optimum specific to the CAPIAS intervention that they, meaning Optimum, as a partner entity, have agreed to deliver and coordinate.
Okay. So Mr. Chairman, the partnership that the President would have alluded to is the 30% memorandum that we've been talking about.
The only document we have is an MOU between the CMU and Optimum on this issue, which seemed to be a very general framework about providing training with the CMU, allowing their logo to be used and so on, and for their role in it, CMU would earn a portion of the amount invoiced per client.
The reason why I asked that
There's
question,
no reference in that to
that
to
memo
lunches.
is dated January 5th, correct? The memoranda that was signed with them,
March
March 3rd, 2018, and you're saying that this one was sent to you on when? January 5th?
Of which year?
2018. So the memo was sent to him saying that there was a partnership, but the partnership hadn't existed then. It existed.
Well, if this is the only partnership, we don't.
Okay.
Everything is very up in the air, so we don't really know what's going on. Anyway, I think there's consensus that we will invite the Optimum persons to come so they can give.
Is it a limited liability company or?
It does not say. It doesn't seem to be.
So this person, Joseph Martin, well, it says director. Well,
it says the company is a partnership. It says Optimum Customer Service Consultancy is a Caribbean-based company that operates worldwide to deliver customer service training and consultancy support. The company is a partnership between Joseph Martin and Donna Nicholas. So I don't know if it's really a limited liability company or it's a partnership that's operating under a business name. Sounds to me more likely to be the latter. Yeah. So we could invite one or both of them to come.
That it's a partnership operating under a business name, even though it says it's a company.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the word limited is not in their name, for example, right?
Okay.
So, and the fact that they say the company is a partnership.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the deputy president wouldn't have been aware that this memo came from the president's office and then the partnership was signed. So the memo came on in January saying there's a partnership, but the partnership existed in March, 2 months after?
I cannot really answer to that.
But
I wasn't aware of that memo.
You weren't aware of the memo?
No, I think Dr. Brown actually made me aware of it about 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
That there was a memo from the president to him.
Mr. Chairman, just for Mr. Brown, that memorandum, January 5th memorandum that you just read to us, 2018. January 5th, 2018. I have a question on related to the January 5th memorandum that you just read aloud. From the President, Fritz Pinnock, it starts, kindly receive for your endorsement drafted memorandums. So it seems to me that you were presented with something just to affix your signature on. Is that correct, these memoranda? Yes. You were just asked to sign them. Yes. But you really could not verify whether these were, where the value had been received, whether the government procurement's guidelines had been observed or anything like that. You were just taking the instruction from the president who you reported to. You are correct. Now, I want to know though PS, in the system of accountability in ministries, departments, and agencies, do all signing officers in the chain of approval have a responsibility to ensure that there is compliance with the government's procurement guidelines?
Yes, member. All officers, as a matter of fact, irrespective of where you start in the process, has a responsibility to ensure that there is full compliance.
So then, Dr. Brown, given that you are the one in front of us here, I mean, do you understand that you have the liability, the obligation to have ensured that these payments were in order and that you are in fact violation of your responsibility as an officer at CMU to just sign them off and the president says so. If it was so, then the president should sign them himself if he was the one who had the information. But by just instructing you to sign and you put your name on it, I mean, you're to my mind, at risk of being complicit in this whole exercise. You don't see it that way?
I acted on instructions and the documents were submitted.
As my friend, the attorney, said, I mean, it's only in the military I know that people just take instructions because it comes through the chain of command. But everywhere else, even in the police force, you have the responsibility to exercise your own judgment. And if you don't think it's proper, then you can legitimately refuse to be a party to it. And Mr. Chairman, I made that point because I don't want to beat up on Dr. Cornell Brown, but we've seen so many times before this PAC where junior officers come and tell us that they just follow the instructions from a senior person, whether the general manager or the president or whatever, but seem to take no responsibility for their own role. And there must have been a reason why in the guidelines or the regulations or the relevant procedures that they were required to sign off. The whole thing is around checks and balances, and that usually you can't get these payments out the door without cooperation of 2 or 3 or 4 different officers in the chain of approval and in the approval of both the invoice as well as the payment. So, you know, I am really interested to know, given where we are and what has come out, whether the CMU still operates on this basis, where once the instruction comes from the president or from a senior executive, does everybody just consider it their obligation to just sign off as well and follow these instructions, whether or not they're legal, whether or not they comply with the government procurement guidelines? Both to the Deputy President and to Dr. Brown.
Thank you very much, Member. I'm not so very clear if you're making reference to before I was acting president.
I want to know what is the case now, because it is all well and good for us to be looking back at what has happened in the past.
Thank you very much.
The value of it is that we ensure it doesn't continue going forward. And that is really where my question is pointing to. What is the arrangement now? If you take up your pen today and send a memorandum to somebody who reports to you and says, sign off on this payment for such and such, and I've drafted the memo for your signature, would they sign it, or has something else been put in place in the interim to prevent that from happening?
Thank you very much. From late last year, the Minister of Education, I think I indicated this last week, or 2 weeks ago, when Member Lisa asked the same question, what is presently in place. We now follow government procedure in every aspect of our activities at the university, and especially for procurement, for example, we now have a procurement unit, which I indicated last time. We now also have a procurement committee. The president is not given whenever any item goes to any individual, one, it has to go to procurement committee for approval. It has to go to procurement unit for evaluation, and then it comes back to the president who signs off on it before it goes to finance. And the Ministry of Education actually had trained with us and mandated that any item that is more than 1.5 million cannot be approved at the local level, must go to the council for approval. So that is the process that is in place now. The dictate of the president is not final now. As far as I know, And going forward, the university will continue to comply with that. And I must say that we have a very strict council in place now, who has given instruction that even ordinary letter to the ministry must go through the council for approval before that is done. And I must say that any item of spending or the like, we have to go to the council for approval, including travel.
All right, Member Hannah, and then Member
thank you.
Thank
you, Mr. Chairman.
And then Member Campbell.
Deputy President and the PS, I can empathize to some extent with the staff. And the reason why? Because I remember Dr. Pinnock, and he was a larger-than-life. Everything that he said to you, you were mesmerized by it. And somehow he gave you the assurances that everything at CMI was working correctly. And then when you started to probe and you realized that even some of the public statements that he made to say, well, I didn't know this was happening and I didn't know this was going on and it wasn't my fault. And then now you're seeing the documentation in black and white, live and in living color, with his signatures affixed to direct instructions and a very clear habit and pattern that he had to be instructing unilaterally from his office. I think in some jurisdictions, perhaps threatening, Mr. Chairman, might be the wrong word. I heard Ms. Hayden spoke about the word subordination. I don't know what may have transpired during this period of wanton liberty in terms of exercising power to do things that were not exactly in keeping with the protocol and guidelines and governance strategies of the institution. And I'm trying to find out, because what is going on in the world for me now, and this is what I feel passionate about. We see people revolting. We see people coming forward. I don't necessarily excuse the fact that you stamp and rubber stamp something if you are competent and you can question. But I also realize that in circumstances that appear beyond your control, you acquiesce or you fall in line. The question I have for both Dr. Brown and Ms. Hayden is, why did you feel, what was it going on in the institution from the president's office or from whenever? Because it didn't seem as if there was coordination in the units. What made you feel you had to, at this point, go in a direction? Because what I'm gathering from your statements today is that you feel the need to come forward and tell the truth as you see it. So what was going on then, why you did it? And why do you feel now it is important for you to clear the air?
Well, with respect to the CAPIES intervention that these lounge providers are associated with, member, I came on board to coordinate a program that I was told is really problematic. I proved it for myself that it was really problematic. Because when you have committed funds to train 600 people, starting in 2016, and that should have been a training that is about 18 months, and I came on in October of 2017, and you're being told that the training has pretty much not started, except for St. Catherine and Kingston, the group. It started, yes, but the participants cannot be found. And you are told that, there's another version of CAPIES that is not your remit, but it's how the university operates different version. As much as you don't have responsibility for coordinating that, you have a responsibility to some extent, for administration of it. And in this case, if you're indicating to me that you have a training that will be starting in a particular community and you're providing lunch for the participants, and you're asking the faculty, and by extension me, to sign off on the provision of lunch, that sort of falls within the scope of your responsibility. So that's the basis on which I acted, and to be very frank, the president did indicate that they were on a mission to spread this CAPIES intervention right across Jamaica. As a matter of fact, in addition to the 600 individuals that that training that I had responsibility for, we were instructed again to start a training going into Norwood and Flanders and those communities. We work with the police high command to recruit the participants. We had a big to do with in terms of launching that program. We recruited, with the help of the police high command, about 80 participants. And a week later, we were told that we should abandon that intervention. So the expansion of the CAPIES program, even though I was not responsible for coordinating all versions, there was really no smoking gun at the time. There was really never a need to call Optimum in. Let me just mention again, Optimum, that's not the only intervention Optimum attends to. I have seen Optimum in action, and they do really good work. I'm saying this is separate from CAPIES. This has to do with the BPO training that they did. So I'm saying there's an obvious relationship. Good, so that would have invited no cause for concern.
Your response is invited to that question if you want to, but we're up against a time limit. So if you want, I know, that's what I'm saying. Your response is invited to that question as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. When I went to CMU in 2014, CMI at the time, I went because, as a matter of fact, before I went there, I used to volunteer. I come from the shipping industry, and I used to volunteer because I saw the need. I come from a little district in St. Thomas called Amityville, and the only outlet for many of us was through education, and I felt the need to give back that way. As project manager, one of the things we lacked at CMU was space. And so we've been going at a pace, trying to find space every semester. In 2015, we had to put up a structure in 74 days to host students because we had 400 students coming back on campus, and we had nowhere to put them. So we've been galloping a lot. And the expectation is that when you are galloping at that pace, that the other team players are helping the parts of the process. Because procurement isn't just a unit by itself. There are different parts to the process. In many instances, you take the bull by the horn and you drive it through. But sometimes when you're working on 4, 5, 6, sometimes 8 projects at a time, construction projects, it gets onerous. I did what I did because I felt it was in the best interest of the students who I saw on a daily basis, begged on their behalf, my friends personally. And so it was trying to make sure that the students had the accommodation. When I went there, what we have done now as a team, we have more than quadrupled the space for students and staff. We had staff who were basically in a bunk desk situation, and we just didn't have the resources. A slower pace would have helped.
Ms. Hayden, we don't have time for a long answer.
Thank you, Chair. I did what I did in the best interest of, I thought, the students and staff of CMU.
Thank you. Members, it's 1:08. 2 other members had wanted to ask questions. Do you want to? 3 other members. No. Member Clark and Member Campbell had both. All right, thank you. So go ahead, Member Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. President and your team, in the new structure which you have, do you have an internal auditor who would then validate the procedures which you have in place now to govern or to militate against what happened in the past?
Yes, it is something that I'm asking the PS to prepare for us for next week. Chairman, all arrangements for the CAP program would have come through the Ministry of Education in terms of payments, terms of all of that. Could you ask the ministry to provide that for us next week?
Chairman, if I may just say to member, not all arrangements, sir. The ministry only had a relationship with the original career advancement program, the CAPES program, with the different iterations. That is a program that was designed, developed, and implemented by CMU. So I can provide the details of the original CAP, which started in 2010, and the framework documentation. So I can provide that, but I have no information on the CAPES, other than what I received from CMU and sent to this committee.
So
sir.
the funding for CAPES was out of CMU's own resources, its own budget?
I can confirm, sir, that the funding for the CAPES did not come from the ministry. The CMU approached the ministry, I think, when they started the CAPES program. We had indicated that once everything is in place, we would have supported. We really did not provide any support for that program at all, except for an iteration at Nakalva Technical, and we paid the funds directly to Nakalva Technical for the implementation of that program. So the ministry has only provided for CMU for the career advancement program, and I have the breakdown of what we have provided for them, and that information can be provided with the MOUs and other documentation. So that's the original CAP from 2010.
So where did the other funding come from?
Mr. Professor Ajaguna, the funding for the CAPES program, which was a CMU program, where did that funding come from?
From HART NTA.
HART NTA. So you had a MOU with HART, you had an agreement with HART. What did you have?
Let me check and revert back to you, sir.
Chairman, if I may, that's a protocol document that I spoke about. This is in place.
So just in terms of next week, next meeting, I meant, the PSR, CMU, as appropriate. Remember, I had asked a question about what were the actual training payments made to Optimum. We got the 47, whatever it was, million for the launches that Optimum had designated the suppliers. But I wanted to know what were the other payments to Optimum related for those students that were being fed those lunches.
That presumably would be under the learning readiness version of CAPES. But
nobody seems to be very clear.
Not very clear, yeah.
Or maybe just bring all the payments to Optimum that CMU made during this time, and we can try and see if we can sort it out as best as possible.
And we're going to invite Optimum to come.
And we would. Yeah. Would it be for that same meeting?
It could be, yes. Yeah. And I believe it's the 16th. So members, the proposal is that we adjourn until the 16th. Can I have a motion? So moved by Member Bunting. Seconded? Yes, then. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Meeting is adjourned.
Cool.
It seems as if we have just started.
Never mind, Master, so it go.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for it.